The research vessel Zenith drifted silently through the star-speckled void, its hull gleaming silver against the cosmic darkness. Within its laboratories and observation decks, the peaceful hum of scientific equipment created a symphony of discovery that had become as familiar as breathing to the multi-species crew aboard. Dr. Sarah Chen pressed her palm against the cool transparent steel viewport, watching the distant swirl of the Kepler for 42 system's outer planets. 3 years aboard the Zenith had taught her to find beauty in the endless black, though her colleagues often teased that humans were the only species romantic enough to stare wistfully into space. The Interstellar Research Consortium's xenobiology surveys were methodical work, cataloging flora, fauna, and atmospheric conditions across dozens of worlds, but Sarah had found peace in the routine after leaving her former life behind. Dar. Chen, your presence is requested on the bridge, came the distinctly measured voice of Kythara through the comm system. The Saurian researcher's words carried that characteristic precision his people were known for, each syllable carefully weighted and considered. Sarah made her way through the vessel's curved corridors, passing the hydroponics bay where Zixtal's mandibles clicked in what she'd learned was the Vrillan equivalent of humming. The insectoid scientist's compound eyes tracked her movement with mechanical precision, for arms simultaneously adjusting nutrient flows while his secondary brain processed atmospheric readings from their current survey target. The bridge of the Zenith represented everything the consortium stood for, cooperation between species that had once viewed each other with suspicion. Captain Martinez, a weathered human with kind eyes, nodded as Sarah approached the central holographic display where Kythara's 7-foot frame cast an imposing shadow. We've detected something unusual, Kythara announced, his scaled fingers dancing across the tactical interface. The hologram shifted to show energy signatures emanating from the fourth planet in the system, readings that made Sarah's breath catch in her throat. Those patterns. She whispered, studying the cascading data streams. They're not natural. Zixtal's chittering voice joined the conversation through the comm system, his hive mind processing capabilities allowing him to analyze multiple data streams simultaneously. Consensus indicates artificial origin. Technology signatures suggest advanced civilization, though planetary scans show no current life signs above bacterial level. Captain Martinez frowned, the lines around his eyes deepening. We sent an advance team down 3 days ago. Dr. Patel, Commander Thorne, and their escort. They were supposed to report back yesterday. The bridge fell silent except for the gentle hum of life support systems. Sarah felt a familiar chill, the same sensation that had saved her life during the Titan colony conflicts, when her medic training had been secondary to her survival instincts. Sir, the communications officer called out, her voice tight with tension. I'm picking up a distress beacon. It's Dr. Patel's emergency transmitter. The holographic display shifted again, showing a weak signal originating from the planet's surface. But it wasn't the technical readouts that made Sarah's blood run cold, it was the timestamp. The beacon had been activated just 10 minutes ago, despite the team being missing for over 36 hours. Someone, or something, down there was using their equipment. ## Character development and world building. The Interstellar Research Consortium had been humanity's greatest diplomatic achievement, uniting 3 species under the banner of peaceful scientific exploration. For 50 years, humans, Saurians, and Vrillans had worked together, their different approaches to knowledge creating a synergy that advanced galactic understanding exponentially. Saurians like Kythara approached problems with methodical logic, their evolved brains processing information in hierarchical patterns that left little room for error. Standing over 7 feet tall with emerald scales that shifted color based on emotional state, they commanded respect through sheer presence. Their homeworld's harsh desert environment had bred a species that valued patience and calculated decision-making above all else. Kythara himself had spent 2 centuries perfecting his field techniques, and his reputation for thorough analysis was legendary within consortium circles. The Vrillans represented the pinnacle of collective intelligence. Zixtal's species had evolved from colonial insects, maintaining a hive-mind connection that allowed instantaneous information sharing across their entire population. His four arms could operate independently while his compound eyes processed visual spectrums far beyond what other species could detect. Technology flowed from Vrillan minds like water, their understanding of quantum mechanics and energy manipulation making them invaluable to any research expedition. Yet their collective nature sometimes created blind spots. Decisions made by consensus could lack the innovative spark of individual thought. And then there were the humans, the youngest species to join the consortium. Many Saurians and Vrillans still viewed humanity as emotionally unstable, their brief lifespans leading to impulsive decisions that logical minds found difficult to predict. What they didn't understand was that human emotional responses had been forged in the crucible of a world filled with apex predators, where split-second decisions meant the difference between survival and death. Sarah Chen embodied this duality perfectly. Her service record showed a decorated combat medic from the Titan Colony War, where she'd saved dozens of lives while under enemy fire. But trauma had driven her to seek peace in the stars, trading battlefield medicine for xenobiology research. She'd spent 3 years aboard the Zenith studying alien ecosystems, her human intuition often providing insights that purely logical approaches missed. The relationship between the three species was built on professional respect, though underlying prejudices remained. Saurians viewed humans as useful but unpredictable, while Vrillans saw them as fascinating case studies in individual consciousness. Humans, for their part, sometimes felt like the junior partners in conversations that had been ongoing for centuries before their species had achieved spaceflight. As the Zenith adjusted course toward the mysterious planet, Sarah found herself studying the preliminary geological surveys. The world below showed signs of ancient civilization, massive stone structures that defied easy categorization, suggesting an intelligence that had once thrived in the planet's dense jungle environment. But atmospheric readings indicated the dominant life forms had vanished millennia ago, leaving behind only ruins and questions. What troubled Sarah most was the planet's ecological profile. Every world they'd surveyed followed predictable patterns: herbivores, omnivores, and predators existing in rough balance. This world showed a massive gap in the food chain, as if something had systematically eliminated every large species except itself. The implication sent a chill down her spine that had nothing to do with the ship's environmental controls. #rising action. The investigation. The shuttle Meridian descended through roiling cloud cover, its hull shuddering as it encountered unexpected atmospheric turbulence. Sarah checked her equipment harness for the third time, the familiar weight of scientific instruments a poor substitute for the tactical gear she'd once carried. Beside her, Kythara reviewed topographical data with methodical precision, while Zixtal's mandibles clicked in rapid sequence as he processed real-time atmospheric readings. Landing zone is approximately 2 kilometers from the advance team's last known position, Captain Martinez announced from the pilot's seat. Weather patterns show increasing storm activity, so we'll need to work fast. The jungle that greeted them upon landing defied every xenobiology textbook Sarah had studied. Massive ferns stretched 40 meters into the canopy, their fronds rustling with movement that seemed too coordinated to be wind-driven. Bioluminescent fungi created patches of eerie blue-green light that shifted and pulsed like breathing organisms. The air itself felt heavy, not just with humidity but with an almost palpable sense of watchfulness. Curious, Kythara observed, his scales shifting to a muted amber that indicated heightened alertness. The plant life shows signs of defensive adaptation far beyond normal evolutionary pressure. These thorns, these toxin secretions, they suggest the presence of extremely aggressive herbivores or extremely effective predators that forced everything else to develop extreme defenses, Sarah finished, her hand unconsciously moving to the emergency beacon on her belt. Her medic training had taught her to read environmental signs, and everything about this jungle screamed danger. They found the first piece of equipment 50 meters from the landing site, Dr. Patel's atmospheric analyzer, its casing cracked but the data core intact. Zixtal's compound eyes examined it from multiple angles while his secondary arms interfaced with the device's memory banks. Analysis indicates sudden impact damage, he reported, his translator rendering the clicking sounds into standard consortium common. Device was not dropped but struck with significant force. No biological residue suggests immediate removal from impact site. The trail led deeper into the jungle, marked by scattered equipment and disturbing signs. Blast burns on tree trunks indicated weapons fire, but the patterns were wrong, too precise, too controlled. Whatever had attacked the advance team had superior tactical knowledge and the discipline to use minimal force for maximum effect. Sarah's unease grew with each step. Her enhanced pattern recognition, honed by years of battlefield medicine, was picking up subtle inconsistencies in their surroundings. Broken branches that fell in unnatural patterns. Disturbed ground that suggested movement but showed no clear tracks. The jungle felt like a carefully constructed stage, designed to channel their investigation along a predetermined path. It was Kythara who first spotted the ruins. Massive stone blocks rose from the jungle floor, covered in millennia of growth but still maintaining structural integrity that spoke of advanced engineering. The architecture was unlike anything in consortium databases, flowing curves that seemed to follow organic principles while maintaining geometric precision. But it was the carvings that made Sarah's blood run cold. Every surface showed the same motif, a tall, bipedal figure with elongated limbs and razor-sharp appendages, depicted in various hunting poses. The carved prey animals were clearly from different worlds, some matching species from Saurian databases, others resembling creatures from Vrillan colonial records. And in the center of the largest carving, unmistakably human figures fleeing in terror. Impossible, Kythara breathed, his logical mind struggling to process the implications. These carvings predate human spaceflight by thousands of years. How could? The attack came without warning. Sarah's peripheral vision caught movement, a shimmer in the air like heat distortion, moving with predatory grace between the ancient stones. Her combat instincts screamed danger, but before she could shout a warning, something struck Kythara with enough force to send his massive frame crashing into a moss-covered wall. Zixtal's technological advantages meant nothing against an enemy that moved faster than his compound eyes could track. For arms reached for weapons and shields simultaneously, but claws that seemed to materialize from empty air shredded his equipment harness and sent him tumbling into the underbrush. Sarah dove behind the nearest stone block as the air around her exploded with violence. Glimpses of movement, too fast to be natural, too coordinated to be random, suggested multiple attackers working in perfect synchronization. She caught her first clear look at their hunter when it paused for a microsecond to assess its next target. 8 feet tall, covered in scales that shifted color and pattern to match its surroundings perfectly. Elongated limbs ending in claws designed for rending and tearing. But it was the eyes that stopped her breath, intelligent, calculating, and filled with the confidence of an apex predator that had never encountered effective resistance. The Kythara had found them. Hashtag escalating tension, the hunt begins. The jungle erupted into chaos as more Kythara materialized from the shadows, their adaptive camouflage making them nearly impossible to track until they moved. Sarah counted at least 6 distinct shapes, each one moving with the fluid precision of a perfect killing machine. Their pack coordination was flawless, while 2 engaged Kythara in direct combat, others flanked their position with tactical awareness that spoke of vast experience. Kythara's massive frame was his greatest asset and his most critical weakness. His logical mind processed the threat assessment with typical Saurian efficiency, attempting to establish communication through standard consortium protocols. "We represent peaceful scientific exploration," he called out in multiple languages, his translator cycling through every known xenobiological communication format. "Our presence poses no threat to your territory or resources." The lead Kythara's response was a sound that might have been laughter, a chittering vocalization that seemed to mock the very concept of diplomacy. Its claws extended with metallic precision as it circled Kythara's position, testing the Saurians' defenses with probing attacks that drew small amounts of blood while avoiding vital areas. It was playing with its prey, demonstrating superior skill through restraint rather than overwhelming force. Zixtal's technological superiority proved equally ineffective. His emergency shields flickered to life, creating a protective energy barrier that should have been impenetrable to any primitive species. The Kythara studied the barrier for perhaps 3 seconds before one of them produced a device clearly salvaged from previous expeditions, a consortium standard shield disruptor that collapsed Zixtal's defenses instantly. "They've been hunting us," Sarah realized with growing horror. "They've been taking our equipment, studying our tactics, learning our weaknesses." The implications were staggering. How many expeditions had disappeared? How many crews had been systematically dissected to provide intelligence about consortium species and their capabilities? The pack leader's attention turned to Sarah, and she found herself looking into eyes that held terrifying intelligence. This wasn't a beast operating on instinct, this was a sapient hunter that had analyzed dozens of human combat patterns and found them wanting. Its posture shifted subtly, adopting a stance that suggested familiarity with human movement patterns and reaction times. But Sarah Chen was not a typical research scientist. Her transformation began subtly, a shift in breathing pattern that slowed her heart rate and sharpened her focus. 3 years of peaceful research had created a veneer of civilization over instincts forged in humanity's most violent conflicts. As the Kythara moved to flank her position, something fundamental awakened in her neural pathways. The first Kythara to reach her position expected the typical human response: panic, retreat, or desperate defensive measures. Instead, Sarah moved with fluid economy, her body responding to training that had been dormant but never forgotten. She didn't try to match the alien's speed, she anticipated its movement and positioned herself where its momentum would carry it. The combat knife that appeared in her hand had been disguised as a geological sampling tool, but its edge carried the same keen precision that had once saved lives on Titan Colony. Her strike was surgical, a precise cut across the Kythara's primary visual sensor that temporarily blinded it without causing fatal damage. It was a warning. She understood anatomy, she understood combat, and she was prepared to escalate. The pack leader's posture shifted from predatory confidence to wary assessment. Its prey had just demonstrated capabilities that didn't match their intelligence profiles of human responses. Around the clearing, the other Kythara paused in their systematic dismantling of Kythara and Zixtal's defenses, recalibrating their tactics based on this unexpected variable. Kythara's logical mind finally grasped what he was witnessing. "Sarah," he called out, his voice carrying a mixture of awe and concern, "what are you doing?" "What I was trained to do," she replied, her voice carrying a coldness that neither of her companions had ever heard before. "Survive." The battle for survival was about to begin, but the roles of predator and prey were no longer as clearly defined as the Kythara had assumed. For the first time in their species' hunting history, they were about to encounter something their intelligence had never prepared them for, a human being pushed beyond the limits of civilized behavior, with nothing left to lose and everything to protect. #climax, Apex Predator revealed Sarah's transformation was complete now, every vestige of the peaceful xenobiologist stripped away to reveal the combat-hardened survivor beneath. The jungle around her became a tactical environment, every shadow a potential advantage, every sound a piece of intelligence, every movement calculated for maximum efficiency. This was the human species as evolution had truly designed them, persistence hunters with pattern recognition capabilities that could adapt to any prey. The Kythara pack leader circled her with increased wariness, its confidence shaken by her unexpected competence. It had studied dozens of human subjects, dissecting their responses to fear and pain, but this human moved differently. Her breathing patterns indicated battle-ready alertness rather than panic. Her positioning showed understanding of terrain advantages. Most disturbing of all, her eyes held the same calculating intelligence that marked successful apex predators. Sarah began her own hunt. She didn't wait for the Kythara to attack, she became the aggressor, moving through the jungle with deadly purpose. Her knowledge of xenobiology became a weapon as she identified which plants secreted toxins and began coding her improvised weapons. Her understanding of atmospheric conditions told her where sound would carry and where it would be muffled. Most importantly, her human ability to think beyond immediate circumstances allowed her to plan 3 moves ahead. The first Kythara she eliminated had been stalking Zixtal through the underbrush, confident in its camouflage and superior speed. It never considered that its prey might circle around and approach from above. Sarah dropped from a massive fern frond like a striking serpent, her modified sampling tools finding the precise nerve clusters that would disable without killing. The hunter became the hunted in a matter of seconds. Kythara watched in fascination and growing respect as Sarah systematically dismantled the pack's tactical advantages. Remarkable, he breathed, his analytical mind cataloging every movement. She's using their own hunting strategies against them, but with human innovations they haven't encountered before. The pack leader's response was swift and brutal. It abandoned subtle tactics in favor of overwhelming force, calling its remaining hunters into a coordinated assault designed to crush this unexpected resistance. But Sarah had anticipated this escalation. Her human understanding of psychological warfare came into play as she used the jungle's acoustics to create false positions, drawing attacks toward empty locations while she repositioned for strikes against isolated targets. Zixtal's compound eyes tracked movement patterns that his logical processing centers couldn't quite believe. Her tactical adaptability exceeds all baseline projections for human combat effectiveness, he reported to Kythara through their emergency comm link. She's demonstrating capabilities that suggest evolutionary advantages far beyond our species' assessments. The turning point came when Sarah encountered the pack leader in direct combat. It was 8 feet of perfectly evolved killing machine, with claws that could shred steel and reflexes honed by millennia of successful hunts. Its camouflage made it nearly invisible, its speed was superhuman, and its intelligence had been sharpened by analyzing the combat patterns of dozens of species. By every logical measure, it should have overwhelmed her instantly. Instead, Sarah did something no prey species had ever done, she made the Kythara afraid. Her attack patterns were unlike anything in its experience. Where other species fought defensively, she pressed forward with relentless aggression. Where they used their strongest attributes, she turned weaknesses into advantages. Her smaller size became superior mobility. Her apparent technological inferiority masked tactical creativity that caught the alien off guard repeatedly. The combat was savage and brief. Sarah's military training had emphasized efficiency over style, and she fought with the brutal economy of someone who understood that hesitation meant death. She used the Kythara's own strength against it, redirecting its momentum into the jungle's hazards. She exploited its overconfidence, feinting weakness to create openings for decisive strikes. When the pack leader finally fell, its dying gaze held something Sarah had never seen in any predator species, recognition of a superior hunter. The remaining Kythara stopped their attacks on Kythara and Zixtal, their pack hierarchy suddenly in chaos. Their alpha had been defeated by what they had considered inferior prey, and their entire understanding of galactic species capabilities was crumbling. For the first time in their evolutionary history, they experienced something their species had never known, the fear of being hunted. Sarah stood over the fallen pack leader, breathing heavily but victorious. Around her, the jungle had fallen silent except for the sound of retreating Kythara, apex predators that had just learned they were no longer at the top of the food chain. ## emotional depth and character resolution. The aftermath of combat left Sarah standing in a clearing that had been transformed from a place of scientific discovery into a battlefield. The silence that followed was deeper than the jungle's usual quiet, it was the profound stillness that comes after the fundamental order of things has been challenged and changed forever. Kythara approached slowly, his massive frame moving with newfound respect and, if Sarah was reading his body language correctly, a trace of fear. His logical mind was struggling to process what he had witnessed. "Dr. Chen," he said carefully, his translator rendering his words with unusual hesitation, "your combat capabilities far exceed any projections in human species assessments." Sarah looked down at her hands, still stained with alien blood, and felt the weight of what she had become settling over her like a familiar but unwelcome coat. "This isn't who I wanted to be," she said quietly. "I came out here to escape this part of myself." Zixtal's compound eyes studied her from multiple angles, his hive mind processing capabilities working overtime to reassess everything he thought he knew about human psychology. "The collective consciousness requires clarification," he stated with unusual directness. "Your actions suggest military training far beyond standard consortium profiles." Your tactical awareness indicates combat experience against sophisticated opponents. The words came slowly, pulled from memories Sarah had tried to bury beneath 3 years of peaceful research. Titan Colony War. I was a combat medic, but the distinction between healer and killer becomes meaningless when you're the last thing standing between your patients and the enemy. She gestured toward the jungle around them. I thought I could leave that behind. I thought science and discovery could replace the need for violence. Kythara's scales shifted to a deep blue, a color Sarah had learned indicated profound contemplation. Your species' capacity for violence is matched only by your capacity for restraint, he observed. You eliminated threats without unnecessary brutality. You protected companions who had underestimated both you and our enemies. This suggests a level of evolved warrior psychology that our databases do not adequately describe. The realization was uncomfortable for all 3 species represented in that jungle clearing. The Interstellar Research Consortium had been built on the assumption that humans were the youngest, most emotionally unstable, and therefore most predictable species in the Alliance. Every diplomatic protocol, every military assessment, every colonial expansion plan had been based on the fundamental belief that humans could be understood and managed through their emotional responses. Sarah's display of tactical superiority had shattered those assumptions completely. I need to know something, Sarah said, turning to face both her companions directly. Are you afraid of me now? The question hung in the humid air like a challenge. Kythara's analytical mind processed the query with characteristic thoroughness before responding. Fear would be inaccurate, he said slowly. Respect would be more precise. Your species possesses capabilities that our intelligence assessments fail to identify. This represents a significant gap in our understanding of human potential. Zixtal's mandibles clicked in what Sarah had learned was the Vrillan equivalent of deep consideration. The hive mind reaches consensus. Individual human consciousness represents evolutionary advantages that collective intelligence cannot easily predict or counter. Your capacity for independent tactical innovation exceeds our modeling parameters. What struck Sarah most profoundly was not their words, but what they weren't saying. Neither species was questioning her right to have defended them. Neither was suggesting that her violence had been excessive or inappropriate. They were, for the first time since she'd known them, treating her as an equal, not despite her capacity for violence, but because of it. I've spent 3 years trying to be someone I'm not, Sarah realized aloud. Trying to prove that humans could be peaceful, scientific, civilized. But civilization isn't the absence of the ability to fight, it's the choice of when to fight and when not to. The profound truth of her words resonated through the clearing. She had not become less human by embracing her warrior nature, she had become more complete. The compassion that drove her scientific research and the lethal efficiency that had saved their lives came from the same evolutionary source, a species that had learned to survive through both cooperation and competition, through both healing and harming. As they prepared to leave the jungle and return to the zenith, Sarah felt a weight lifting from her shoulders that she hadn't even realized she'd been carrying. She was no longer running from who she had been, she was integrating who she was with who she wanted to become. #falling action, galactic implications. The rescue shuttle's approach to the zenith was met with an unusual level of activity on the research vessel's docking bay. Captain Martinez waited with a full medical team, expecting to treat combat injuries and trauma, but what he saw emerging from the Meridian defied his expectations entirely. Kythara moved with a dignity that somehow seemed enhanced rather than diminished by the experience. His scales showed the deep emerald color that indicated profound respect, a hue reserved for acknowledging superior intellect or capability. Zixtal's movements were more animated than usual, his 4 arms gesturing in complex patterns that suggested he was already transmitting detailed reports back to the Vrillan collective consciousness. And Sarah walked between them not as a rescued scientist, but as someone who had fundamentally changed the dynamic of their relationship. The debriefing session that followed would become legendary within consortium archives, though its full implications wouldn't be understood for months. Captain Martinez listened with growing amazement as Kythara delivered his report with characteristic precision, but with an underlying tone that suggested profound paradigm shifts in his thinking. The human species' combat capabilities have been systematically underestimated in all consortium assessments, Kythara stated formally. Dr. Chen demonstrated tactical awareness, adaptive strategy implementation, and individual combat effectiveness that exceeded the combined projections for our three-species team. Zixtal's testimony was even more striking. The Vrillans' hive-mind connection meant that his words were being processed simultaneously by millions of his species across dozens of worlds. Collective analysis indicates that human individual consciousness provides evolutionary advantages that our species cannot replicate or adequately counter. Human capacity for independent tactical innovation represents a strategic capability that fundamentally alters galactic power assessments. The implications rippled outward from the zenith at faster-than-light speeds. Within hours, Sarah's combat performance was being analyzed by military strategists across Saurian space. The methodical, logical warriors who had viewed humans as useful but unpredictable allies began reassessing every joint military operation, every colonial expansion plan, every resource-sharing agreement. If one human scientist could single-handedly eliminate a pack of apex predators that had been systematically hunting consortium expeditions, what could a trained human military unit accomplish? The Vrillan collective consciousness buzzed with unprecedented activity as trillions of interconnected minds processed the data. Their technological superiority had been their primary advantage in galactic affairs, but technology could be countered by other technology. Individual tactical creativity, however, was something their hive-mind evolution had never developed. The realization that humans possessed capabilities that collective intelligence couldn't predict or replicate sent shockwaves through their entire civilization. But perhaps the most significant change was in how other species viewed human expansion into galactic affairs. For 50 years, humanity had been seen as the enthusiastic junior partners in consortium activities, valuable for their emotional insights and innovative thinking, but not serious contenders for galactic leadership. The discovery that Earth's peaceful scientists carried the genetic heritage of apex predators changed everything. Military recruitment offers began arriving within days, not just from human organizations but from Saurian defense forces and even Vrillan security consortiums. Every major power in the galaxy suddenly wanted to understand how human combat doctrine could be integrated into their own strategic planning. Sarah found herself at the center of a political storm she had never intended to create. Diplomatic representatives requested meetings. Military analysts wanted to interview her. Xenopsychologists proposed comprehensive studies of human combat psychology. The peaceful xenobiologist who had joined the Zenith to escape her violent past had inadvertently become the most important human in galactic affairs. "I never wanted this," she told Captain Martinez during one of their private conversations. "I just wanted to study alien ecosystems and forget about war." Martinez, a career military officer himself, understood her conflict better than most. "You didn't choose this, Sarah, but you can choose what to do with it. The galaxy just learned that humanity isn't the junior species they thought we were. How we handle that knowledge will determine whether we're seen as partners or threats." The rescue of the advance team, when they were finally located in Kythara holding pens deep in the ancient ruins, only reinforced the new paradigm. Dr. Patel and Commander Thorne had been kept alive as subjects for study, their responses to fear and pain carefully documented by hunters who viewed them as sophisticated prey. Their rescue by Sarah's tactical team, now including Kythara and Zixtal as willing subordinates rather than reluctant allies, demonstrated that the power dynamic in consortium expeditions had shifted permanently. #conclusion and message 3 months after the Kythara incident, Sarah stood again at the viewport of the Zenith, but the view had changed in ways that went far beyond the different star system they were now surveying. The reflection looking back at her showed someone who had integrated two seemingly contradictory aspects of human nature, the scientist's curiosity and the warrior's readiness. The galaxy's response to her actions continued to evolve. The Saurian High Command had issued new military assessments that reclassified humans from support specialists to strategic assets. Vrillan hive minds across dozens of worlds were studying human military history with the same intensity they once reserved for quantum mechanics. Even species that had never directly interacted with humanity were requesting detailed analyses of human combat psychology and tactical doctrine. But perhaps the most significant change was in the day-to-day relationships aboard research vessels like the Zenith. Kythara no longer spoke to Sarah with the patience one might show to a promising but inexperienced colleague. His communications carried the respect due to a proven warrior and tactical equal. When difficult decisions arose, he actively sought her input rather than simply informing her of conclusions reached through Saurian logic. Zixtal's transformation was even more pronounced. The Vrillan had requested assignment to teams that included human personnel, stating that exposure to individual tactical thinking enhanced his own capabilities in ways that pure hive-mind consciousness could not achieve. His reports back to the collective consistently emphasized the strategic value of human unpredictability and adaptive thinking. The paradigm has shifted permanently, Kythara observed during one of their regular briefings. Galactic powers are reassessing not just human capabilities, but the fundamental assumptions about species hierarchies that have guided interstellar relations for centuries. Sarah nodded, understanding the implications better than she had 3 months ago. "We were never the young species everyone thought we were," she said. "We were the survivors of a world that produced apex predators as a matter of course. Our compassion didn't evolve despite our capacity for violence, it evolved because of it. Species that can destroy each other learn the value of choosing not to." The message resonating through galactic civilization was profound and unsettling. Humanity's expansion into space hadn't been the triumph of civilization over savagery, it had been the evolution of apex predators who had learned to channel their capabilities toward cooperation rather than conquest. The same genetic heritage that produced the galaxy's most effective soldiers also produced its most innovative scientists, its most empathetic diplomats, and its most adaptive explorers. Other species were beginning to understand that human emotional responses weren't signs of instability, they were finely tuned survival mechanisms developed by a species that had faced every possible threat and learned to overcome them. Human individuality wasn't a weakness to be managed, it was a strength that provided tactical advantages no collective consciousness could replicate. As Sarah prepared for their next planetary survey, she reflected on the lesson the Kythara had inadvertently taught her. She had spent years trying to suppress the warrior aspects of her nature, believing that violence and scientific curiosity were incompatible. But the truth was more complex and more hopeful than she had imagined. Humanity's greatest strength lay not in choosing between compassion and lethality, but in understanding when each was appropriate. The same species that could eliminate apex predators with surgical precision could also dedicate their lives to healing, discovery, and the expansion of knowledge. The capacity for violence made their choice of peace meaningful rather than merely inevitable. The galaxy was still adjusting to this new understanding of humanity's place in the cosmic order. Some species viewed the revelation with concern, others with fascination, and a few with the kind of respect typically reserved for equals rather than junior partners. But all of them now understood that Earth's children carried within their DNA the accumulated wisdom of every predator their ancestors had faced and conquered. Sarah smiled as she watched the stars whirl past the viewport. Tomorrow would bring new worlds to explore, new species to study, and new challenges to overcome. But she would face them not as someone hiding from her past, but as someone who had learned to integrate all aspects of her humanity into a more complete whole. The galaxy had learned that humans were apex predators. More importantly, humans had learned that being apex predators didn't make them monsters, it made them responsible for choosing how to use their gifts. And that choice, made consciously and deliberately, was perhaps the most human trait of all. In the end, the Kythara had been wrong about one fundamental assumption. They had believed that apex predator status was about the ability to hunt and kill. But true apex predators, Sarah now understood, were defined not by their capacity for destruction, but by their wisdom in knowing when destruction was necessary and when it was not. That wisdom, born from the genetic memory of a species that had climbed to the top of evolution's ladder and chosen to extend a hand to help others climb as well, would guide humanity's path among the stars for generations to come. The apex paradox was resolved, the greatest predators were those who chose to be protectors instead.